welcome to the second webinar in Colourtrend Summer Series. So today we're talking about bringing color outside into your garden and your outdoor spaces as well as your balconies. So while we're waiting for people to come in, we'll just put up a little poll just to see where everyone's at and their knowledge, so we can make sure that we address the right things today for everyone. And so that's just going to pop up in your screen there now, and you can just work away with it. Also throughout the webinar, we're also going to be taking some questions and answers. So some of the team will be working away on that in the background, and you can just pop any questions you have in there. So that's the Q&A button down in the bottom and not the chat button. So we'll also address a few of those questions at the end there as well. Perfect. So just a few more joining now, which is brilliant. And you can just answer the poll questions there. That will be up. That's great. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. So we'll just dive right in then. So if we just start with, my name is Sheenagh Green. I am a colour consultant here with Colourtrend Paints. And I'm delighted to welcome with us Carton, also known as Dainty Dress Diaries. So Carton is a massive DIY enthusiast. Thanks so much for joining us, Carton. Do you want to give a little introduction to yourself?
So my name is Carton. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I am an author, a YouTuber, and obsessed with all things DIY and craft, and particularly this time of year, but kind of most of the year, I love being outside. So when you guys asked me to do this, I was like, absolutely yes, because I love outside. I love recycling things in the garden. I love painting things in the garden. And even though it's kind of raining today, I do try and spend as much time as I can when I'm at home outside in the garden.
Thanks so much. I think honestly, you're going to be such a good asset for this webinar, because we're going to be really telling people how to actually do the practical steps themselves so they can undertake the projects.
I'm excited.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. So the main thing, I suppose, to say that we're talking about today is really the outdoor space. So what's really going to be important is where we can bring in the colour, different ideas of whether it's your surrounding walls, your furniture, your planters. You have millions of little different examples of this, Catherine, in your own garden, which is gorgeous. So that'll be great to chat through some of them. And the main thing we're really going to be talking about as well is the method of doing it and the different finishes. So I know even just from some of the projects you've been doing that for outdoors, you'll know yourself that primers are really your best friend when it comes to painting outdoors.
I hold my hands up. I would sometimes in the past skip priming when it comes to outside, because when it's in the house, I would be really like thorough with my prep, prime and paint. But when it's for the outside, I think sometimes we can be a bit more lax. But that has actually cost me in the long run, because just for an example, with windowsills, I never thought to prime masonry. And I had, flaky paint, they didn't last as long, and then I had to redo them. And the same for some other projects, some wood things, I would kind of just, lash on a coat of paint on a sunny afternoon. But realistically, prep is going to save you in the long run. So just taking that extra time and step in the beginning means you're going to have like a piece that's going to last you longer. And to be honest, we should take more prep and priming with outdoor pieces, because they get more of a bashing than indoor pieces.
This is it, exactly.
They're against the elements. Sure, half the time I wouldn't cover something over winter. So, they do take a bashing. So you do want it to last longer. Like, you don't want to be that neighbour who's out painting their wall every summer because it's flaking or it's gone,
Yeah, exactly.
You want to be the one who does it every 5 years or so.
This is, unless you want to change the colour.
Unless you want to change the colour.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose as well, it's really important for us just to explain that, a primer isn't sort of this daunting thing that, like, I know myself that if I'd never painted before, and I think that just doing it once, you learn so much and you just get stuck in. But just to explain to people what a primer actually is. So primer is literally, it goes on like your paint. You just put it on the first coat, and the reason you use a primer is literally to give something for the paint to adhere to. So also if you're painting something like wood, to make sure that the knots in the wood don't start to bleed through. So your primer is really kind of your base for a really good longevity and a really nice finish as well. Would you say that's fair, Catherine?
Yeah,
Is that
and
what you use it for?
it's kind of like, I suppose if you compare it to makeup, or if you get your nails done, a base coat, you wouldn't put makeup on a face that had yesterday's makeup on. So I think doing the preparation of, and also like you said, it's just a coat of paint. And what I like about the Colourtrend ones is they're not too watery, so they go on just as even as a top coat, and because they're water based, they dry really quickly. So I think some of the primers, that there's like a recoat time of 45 minutes, so you can, especially if it's on a warm day or during summertime, it's gonna be like dry quite quickly, so you can then put your top coats on. So that extra step of prep, when you're cleaning and you're lightly sanding the piece, and then applying a thing of primer, that might only take you an hour and a half or an hour, but it's actually going to give you more time when it comes to longevity. And then just with preparation as well, when it's, you know, wood or metal, and when a common question from people is, oh, do I have to sand it? Do I really have to sand it? But you're not sanding it back bare at all. You're scuff sanding, so you can get some kind of scratches in it, so that the paint can adhere to that. So if something is like too smooth, that's where you could have, you know, peeling and stuff. So you're literally just scuff sanding the whole thing, and then cleaning away any grime and stuff. And just with cleaning as well, so when I use like a degreaser, it's just also just making sure, especially if it's on a sunny day, that you rinse away any residue. So whether it's, you know, you're using dish soap as your cleaner, or if you're using crud cutter, sometimes it can dry quite quickly on a sunny day. I noticed that when I was doing my barrels, and I just had to rinse it just to make sure I didn't have, you know, any product that was going to interfere with primers.
Brilliant. And I think that's it as well. We'll like literally show today step by step how to go about a project, so that, you know, you'll know what you need, and, you know, where to start, and then how the finished product can look as well. I think with Colourtrend as well, the main thing is we've 4 primers, and which one of them you use depends on what surface you're priming. So whether it's wood, metal, you know, cement, masonry, or, you know, garden furniture, one of those primers will work for it. And then I suppose the other finishes that you really want to look at for the garden are your wood coat, and then your 3 finishes, which are either eggshell, gloss, or satin. And the reason really for eggshell, gloss, or satin, between the 3 of them, is the finish. So whether you want it as flat as possible, mid-sheen, or really shiny. I think satin would be your go-to, Catherine, would it?
Is, I love satin. Satin is my go-to. Now I know I do have a love of front doors. You know, when you're in town and they have like, I love a painted front door, and a lot of them do be gloss and they look beautiful, and I have appreciation for them. But I think when it comes to projects in my house, I tend to just go with satin. Looks great in the garden, but gloss can be great for certain things. I think gloss can be really nice on metal as well, like, you
Definitely,
know,
definitely.
chairs. But for me, my personal fave is always the satin.
Yeah, and it's fully washable as well, which is like a go-to for outside, definitely. And I think gloss, to keep in mind with gloss, is that preparation for everything is important, but for gloss especially, because any little imperfection will show up with gloss. So that is something just to keep in mind. And they're all really hard wearing. And then your wood coat, really, you can use for your fences, and you can also use it for cement, including, you know, pathways and that. So again, we'll talk to a few projects based on that later on. But that's sort of the main finishes we'd be looking at for painting. So we might dive in then to your project, Catherine. If you want to kind of chat through step by step, that would be brilliant, just to really show people how they can go about doing it themselves.
Yeah, and you know what, I'll keep it as simple as I can. So basically my golden rule that I live by when it comes to painting anything is the prep, prime and paint. And when it comes to preparation, I clean, then I apply a coat of primer, and then I do my top coat. And I make sure that in between every step, there's enough of a drying time as well. So when it comes to washing it and sanding it, so I'll use a degreaser, and I'll use this on any material I'm working with. So whether it was masonry, wood, or metal, I will make sure that I clean everything. And especially when it comes to outdoor stuff, spiders will be hiding underneath. You might have
Cobwebs.
yeah, that's the joy. You may have things like algae on the windowsill that will stop, the paint sticking to it. And then once that's all clean and rinsed off, then I will do some sanding, and I'm lightly scuffing it. And then I use like a brush, just to brush away any of the dust from the sanding, and get a cloth, one last final wipe down, and then it's ready for a coat of primer.
And which is that section there? So with the cleaning and everything. So when you say a degreaser, would that just be some sort of household, even fairy liquid or something like that people could use?
So a fairy liquid or sugar soap. You can
Brilliant.
pick sugar soap up in most places. A lot of the pound shops have them. Crud cutter is great. I use that for a lot. And a bottle.
It gets through anything, doesn't it?
It literally gets through anything. I had some sticker left on a vase, and the crud cutter just lifts it off.
Yeah. And then with the sanding then, Catherine, like you said, you're not trying to really remove any material. You're literally just trying to make some scuffs for the primer to adhere to.
Just some scuffs. And then just a little tip, if maybe you're a bit short on time, maybe you're painting on your day off or over the weekend, a lot of the time I would do maybe some of that prep in the evening, and then the next day I would continue with the painting. Just make sure to cover it so that you don't get any more dirt on it. But that's something that I would do. And then once that's all done, so it's cleaned, it's sanded, you've wiped away any dust, then on to the primer. So if I'm ever unsure on which primer to use, all the information is on the tins. But I do find any of the decorating shops that are stockists are really full of knowledge. So if you're like, I want to do my path, or I want to do a wooden outdoor garden thing, or even tile, they will, because they have so much experience with people kind of coming in and out, they will give you recommendations. But also on your website as well, if I'm ever unsure, I find all the information is kind of on the website for which primer to use.
Exactly.
I seem to always be using prime too. I have a lot of that in my kits.
In fairness though, it works for so many surfaces, it really does. And what you'll find with a lot of the primers, apart from number 4, with a lot of the primers, especially 1 and 2, one might be the best to use, but the other one would be, say 2 ticks. So you kind of they are interchangeable to a certain extent. So again, just if in doubt, have a look in the back of the tin, or even pick up the phone to one of your local stockists is great as well. Yeah.
And one of the things I love is, because it's water based, there's little to no odor, dries really quickly, and there's hardly any yellowing. There's no yellowing at all. I have a lot of stuff done in white in my house with the satin as well. Use the primer. You're not going to get that kind of yellow tone or bleed through from the wood. And that was the thing with the barrels. Because the barrels were from a salvage yard, I really had to scrub these because they had knots in the wood. But also where I could smell whiskey or something off them. So
they were authentic then, for sure.
Authentic whiskey barrels. I was like, they smell like stale whiskey. So I really had to clean to make, because I was worried that I don't know what's kind of in this wood when I go to paint, what is going to come out. So it definitely needed a primer.
So then you put the primer on. Did you just use a standard paintbrush for that?
I used a brush, but when it comes to like the chair that you can see in the picture, I used a roller. So I tend to always have kind of 2 on the go in my hands. I'll have the roller and I'll have the brush. Love the brush for detailed work, or when it's awkward, and then the roller for getting a good coat of stuff on, and then just going back in with the brush. So I always I'd never have one or the other. I always kind of have 2 when I'm doing
Definitely. And especially I find, the foam rollers are really good for timber or even for furniture, because you don't get sort of any of that stippling as well, which is
You
really
almost
nice.
get like an airbrushed or a sprayed effect with it.
Exactly.
Because brush strokes can be nice if you want to get like a vintage feel, or if you want to have like a certain effect, then a thick brush stroke can be nice. You can play around with the textures, but I think most of us just want a nice smooth finish. So the roller is great for that.
Yeah.
And it's quicker. Yeah.
Perfect. So then you put the primer on, you waited for that to dry. I know a lot of people would be like, how long do you wait? But it does kind of depend on the conditions. But with like the primers being water-based, I think if you have your prep done the night before, you could generally do the project in this weather. If it's, you know, kind of humid, and if it's warm enough outside, in a day you could, or over the course of 2 days.
Yeah, so on the chair I was able to do in a day, and the barrel I was able to do in a day. Just started in the morning, and that was actually doing the prep and Dakota primer. It's almost like you just plan your tea breaks for your recoat times. But one thing I will say is, and this happens to me all the time, I'm an eager beaver. My favorite part is putting the color on, doing the last, like the top coat, and seeing it actually transform. If your primer or the first coat of top coat that you put on isn't fully dry, and it might look dry, maybe it's a bit tacky, and if you go on with your brush, you're going to lift that first coat or the primer. So to just try and plan your lunch, have your tea break, then come back to the project when you know it's going to be.
Just really take your time with it and have patience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creativity is a process, it's not a race. And yeah, just take your time. It has happened to me where I ruined the coat underneath because I was too eager and I got too
So you did 1 coat of the primer and then 2 coats of your top coat, which was satin.
Yes, so satin. So on the chair, is it brickstock we used on the chair?
Yeah, gorgeous.
And because it was outside, when it came to picking colors, so in my house, my backdrop is very neutral, very floral, nice and calm. But when it comes to the garden, I am not afraid to do a pop of color, because I feel like there's no rules in the garden. You can get a bit bold, and you don't have to, paint your walls in bold colors. You can do pots, you can do furniture, you can do features on the wall, you can paint your, edging on a raised bed. And I love the mix of a pop of color with the earthy colors that's naturally in the garden. So whether you have wood, your trees, your plants and everything, and then your plants are colorful. And I just feel like
you can get away with a bit more outside. And like you said, if you have quite a neutral house, it's a place that you can play around a bit more. Yeah, definitely.
And there's no rules, and anything goes in the garden.
Exactly. And I think as well, what's good to keep in mind is that, like with the nettle soup you chose, in general, that each color is usually about 2 shades lighter outside. So if you are looking at a color in your house, and say you have a color in your kitchen walls, when you bring that outside, it will be significantly lighter. And also because of the fact that all the outdoor paints have a slight sheen to them, that's going to reflect more light. So generally, you can be a bit braver, go a bit darker most of the time.
That's quite, because nettle soup is actually, I used it in my nephew's bedroom, and he actually picked the color, because I did his bedroom, and I was like, what color do you want to use? And I was like, he's gonna say blue, he's gonna say navy, and he was like, I would really like green. And I gave him the color cards, and he was like, yeah, I like that one. And I was like, really? And the color looks not totally different, but you can see from when I used it in his room with his lighting conditions, because he doesn't get a lot of natural light, how warmer that color is in the bedroom compared to when it's outside in full sun.
Definitely, yeah, and the different finish or what it's up against as well makes such a difference. And the brick stock is so nice with your flowers as well. It works perfect. Really nice. Yeah.
I had actually, when I had shared the reel on Instagram, so like a lot of people were commenting going, oh, I never would have thought of a terracotta color like that. I think sometimes when we look at paint cards, we might dismiss colors that we would almost be like, oh well, I wouldn't use that in my house, but actually it could be amazing, you know, in the garden. Like there was also, you can kind of just see it in the picture, but there is a mustard pot just on top of that barrel there, and even
Is that the French mustard?
yeah, that's French mustard.
It's so nice. Yeah, yeah, really
And
nice.
like they're colors that if I opened up a paint card, I'd be like, oh no. But
Yeah.
then I was thinking in the garden, like that color just popped when it was in a greenhouse, looks totally different. So I think kind of when you're thinking of colors for the garden, you kind of forget about the house. It
Yeah.
kind and
Yeah.
then just be like, right, think of it as an outdoor color.
Exactly.
Have fun with it.
And to, like, you know, like you were saying before, to go have a look at like maybe your neighbor's garden, or
Yes,
you know, to
I am
different
nosy.
shows.
Yeah, I love looking at the neighbors' gardens, and like I just have a little peep just to see what color, you know. Oh, they painted. My neighbor had like a blue shed, two-toned, looks
Yeah.
deadly. And if you're looking for inspiration, obviously it can be on your own doorstep. And a lot of my neighbors, actually this end of my road, we love our gardens, so we
Yeah.
naturally kind of chat to each other and get ideas. But if you go to you know, flower shows, garden shows, I love them. Looking at the show gardens is a great way to get inspiration for color choices. Going to just gardens in general, you know, I'm up in Farmley, just looking at, you know, trying to get some ideas,
Or things that you might not necessarily think you like, but when you see it done, you know, by someone else, or in not on a screen, it can be really
yeah.
different then as
And when you
well.
see
Yeah.
it in person, I love actually coffee shops lately just have amazing, you know, color schemes. And do you know what, even pubs. I was driving, I was actually driving home from Bloom, and I passed, there's a pub in Castleknock, and they had barrels like mine, and they were all painted. And I think they're like a tidy town place, but everyone
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
painting the barrels and stuff and their planters. And I was like,
Gorgeous.
I love the colors they're
Yeah.
using. So
So you
just
can really look anywhere, like you
yeah,
say, just around your own town and that. And then you get to do the fun bit, planting it up, and you just drilled some holes in the bottom of it, did you? Just to make it for drainage as
for
well then.
drainage, yeah. So whatever you're using for a planter in the garden, make sure you're able to add some drainage holes for it. So with that, add the drainage holes before painting if you can, just because you don't want to chip your fresh new
Yeah.
work. So add your drainage holes first. So whether it's a metal container or a wooden one, just use the appropriate drill bit on the base. And then I will put a couple of, if I have broken terracotta pieces, I just put them around the drainage holes so that they don't get clogged with soil. Fill it with soil, and then you can have fun with
The
popping.
fun bit. So yeah, yeah, lovely.
The messy bit, but fun bit.
Oh, it looks so good. I love the nettle soup and the brick stock together. Thanks for being. So we might just then pop on to just a few other ideas of how you can introduce colour into the garden. So we might start with the right hand one here with the brick effect. It's one of my favourite from your own garden. It's gorgeous. So could you just chat through maybe what you did here, Catherine?
Yeah, so I stumbled across this online. I think it was like a Martha Stewart video. Basically, I had spent all my money on my greenhouse, and I really wanted a brick floor, and I had priced reclaimed brick shims.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, the budget is done. So some people online were like, why don't you stencil the floor, because that's really popular. And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, I wonder, can I get a brick stencil? And I had a little look online. That's where I stumbled across a Martha Stewart video where they made a stencil out of sponges.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I just use a sponge? So I basically got, you know, terracotta shade paint. I painted a concrete base white, and then I bricked it myself. So I just cut my sponge into a rectangular shape, and then I just got a bit artsy. And I remember, I think we were having a heat wave at the time, and I was sweating, and I just laid,
especially in the greenhouse as well.
and I laid the bricks how you would just paint them, like, you know, I did a pattern, and then I did the opposite pattern, And I think that was about 3 years ago. I did that in the greenhouse, and they're grand. And I've actually cleaned that floor a good bit, because obviously it being a greenhouse.
Yeah.
So I just brush it with like an outdoor brush with soapy water, rinse it, does be grand. And then
Gorgeous.
I have plain white walls, and I was like, oh, I wonder, could I do a bit of a brick effect on one of the sections, just to make like a bit of a zone and just to break up my plain white wall. So I tried it, and I did it in a little section in front of a flower bed, added an outdoor mirror, and just to try and make it like, I'm just mad to have a secret garden. So the more kind of
Nods to that you can, the better. Yeah, lovely.
um,
And for the flooring, actually, you can use, so we have like a wood coat that the name is a wood coat, but you can use it for cement. So you could do the same effect with that finish.
yeah.
You can also put some, bit of grit or filings in, and your local paint shop should be able to do that for you. Only outdoor we recommend that, but the wood coat is great for that. And then did you upcycle the mirror then as well? It's brilliant, just to add a bit of
That
colour.
mirror is a good old, I think I got it maybe in the range. It was, yeah, that's not an
Yeah.
upcycled one.
It's
So
gorgeous.
yeah, you can pick up outdoor mirrors. I mean, some garden centers will have them super expensive, but you can get them, cheap enough. And then if you are looking for kind of reclaimed stuff, just test it first to see if it's appropriate for outside. I try and not to have them too heavy.
Yeah.
And I also, with positioning mirrors as well, I try to not have them in sunny spots, just for reflecting any sunbeams. And I have them quite low down, just so I don't have any issues with, birds maybe flying into them, which I
That's a
don't
really
have.
good tip.
Yeah, once there's enough kind of foliage around it and it's not up super high, it does be fine.
Yeah.
But obviously, just use your own judgment as well if anyone is
Yeah.
doing it. But and actually another thing I'd love to do as well, I've been trying to keep an eye out for like old gates, and using things like old windows. So I got a pair of old windows from the salvage yard, and they're great for, you can use them as climbers. You can paint them as well in a nice color, and you can make a feature out of them in the garden.
Exactly. And just adding different layers, I think. And I think,
Yeah.
like you just touched on there as well, to use color to zone your garden a bit, because I think, no matter the size of your garden, if you just have one big square and it's just, got one color, it actually can make it feel smaller. Whereas if you have lots of little different zones with your mirror or your brick effect, and then, a planter in a different color, or sort of your bistro area.
That rectangle issue is such a common complaint from people, being like, I have this, I just look out and I have a square patch of grass, which is what I had, and trying to almost make it so your eye can be drawn to something, and you want to walk around and have almost like a journey in the garden, not just go, oh, lovely,
And that's it. Yeah.
nice shed, whatever. But with the stenciling as well, I've seen it so much online, really popular, where like that someone might just have a concrete base and they have their patio table and chairs on it. But I've seen people, doing a stencil design on the base. It could be a Moroccan design, or it might just be black and white checkers. But they'll lead it up the wall as well.
Gorgeous.
And then,
Yeah.
you layer onto it then with, your parasol and your table and chairs. And then before you know it, you have this almost like that's a zone, that's your seating area. And then you have kind of the rest of your planting in your garden and stuff. So
Definitely. And that's something that's going to last all year as well. Like, I think it's so important. Like, obviously at this time of the year, we're in the garden a lot more. We're going to have, maybe some soft furnishings, or, our parasols and things like that out. But come sort of November, you are kind of getting in, or into February, so to think of things like that will last the year and add a bit more atmosphere to the garden.
And almost thinking like, what's it going to look like in winter? It's still going to give you, when you pack away the parasol, or you cover your bits, you still have that kind of nice design that's going to brighten up the space, instead of maybe a grey patch of concrete.
Exactly. This is it. Yeah. So there's just a few more ideas here then, just I suppose to show people little things that they can paint around the garden. It doesn't have to be anything massive, but like even in terms of plant pots, you know, that, you know, old terracotta ones or even plastic ones, again, just they had to be primed. And that's somewhere I think that you can add a bit of color. You know, if you're just starting to introduce like bolder colors into your garden, that it's not going to be, you know, a massive step for
And
the
it's a
first
great
project.
way to, if a lot of people may have balconies or they may just have a concrete garden and they do container gardens, and you know, pots can be expensive. So if you can get, you know, if you go online and you get secondhand plastic pots, paint them up, stencil them, have fun with them, and then you've got a lovely kind of potted section that might not have cost you as much, especially if you can get them, you know, secondhand or cheap. Give them a
Exactly.
bit of stenciling, bit of design, they look great, like.
Definitely. So I know you have a good few tips for us here,
Yeah.
Catherine. So we'll start moving through them. Just I'm really conscious to get the most out of your knowledge as well. So
Yeah.
we might just start with some of your plant recommendations, I suppose, if that's okay.
Yeah, so when it comes to plants, something I'm guilty of as well is I'll pick, you know, perennials, and I'll be obsessed with what's the flower going to look like. But try and think, what is this plant? What's its foliage like? What does it look like when it's not in flower? Having a mix of evergreens as well as perennials, so that come winter time, you're still going to have a little bit of color with your foliage. You might not necessarily have, you know, as much in flower, but you're still going to have a little bit of fullness. And thinking when you're picking a plant, you know, right, it's going to look nice, you know, in spring or whatever, but does it have like a nice autumn color? Don't be afraid to, you know, play around with trees as well, climbing plants. So I have bare white walls, so one of the things I've been trying to do is add height, you know, with climbers, but like that, picking an evergreen climber
That'll last all year then, so
yeah,
that you're
so
not,
that,
and then you still get a little bit more then from the
yeah.
flowers when you come into the spring and summer.
And then I can have fun then with your annuals. So the likes of cosmos and zinnias, lovely flowers that you can use for as cut flowers. They look great in the garden and they'll give you, you know, that summer color. And then coming into autumn, you know, September time, loads of dahlias, hydrangeas, hydrangeas, there's rudbeckias, and then autumn is a lovely time in the garden as well. I know all the leaves start falling and people they see them kind of as a nuisance,
But the color even, yeah.
Color is amazing. And then obviously in winter, but with winter as well, something I did last year was leave the plants go to seed, and some people, well, you do it for the bugs because they'll have somewhere to kind of nest over winter, and the birds can eat the seeds, but they actually look really pretty, especially on a frosty morning as well. If you have old, like I have some fennel that I leave.
I was just going to say, when fennel goes to seed,
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Yeah.
And achillea as well. And when you leave them go to seed, and even if you had any wildflowers that you might have grown in pots, there's a park not too far from me, and they have wildflower meadows. It looks stunning, and they left it go to seed over winter, and it looked beautiful. I looked a bit sad, but with the frosty mornings and everything, and it's better than, you know, a bare wall.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I would say, just I suppose summarize the plants, think of foliage and not just the flower, what it's going to look like all season. Use climbers, don't be afraid of trees. If you have a small garden, look up a tree called an amelanchier. I hope I'm saying that correct. I'm not good at saying the Latin plant names, but that is a really good plant for small gardens, and it flowers. It's a blossom in springtime, has a lovely green flower during or leaf during summer, but it goes orange in autumn.
Okay, gorgeous. So you get kind of different seasons changes
and then
through
also
it.
trees in winter, after they shed their leaves and they're just there like twigs, they still offer like a nice contrast. So the bark of the tree, you know, if it's like a silver birch, you know,
that it doesn't just have to be the actual flower, that the different textures and that can bring in color as well. Amazing. That's some really good names. And again, everyone can watch back through the webinar just if you've missed any of those names, which would be brilliant. So we did touch on a good bit of the outdoor features, like bringing in your window frames and your containers, and they're all opportunities for color. But we might just talk a little bit more about like bringing in fabric and textiles as well, just to layer up a bit more. I know this lovely cushion that you're sitting on in the garden here you made yourself.
Yeah, when it comes to, you know, adding pattern as well. So maybe you don't want to stencil an area, but you still want to have a bit of pattern and a bit of personality. That's where fabric can come in. And think of anything, you know, textiles. So your parasol, and maybe have a colored one or a patterned one. I have seen some, you know, in the garden centres that have fancy, you know, frills, bells and whistles. But if you get a second-hand one, why not sew on some bunting? Very easy to make.
Yeah.
You can use recycled fabrics. The cushion that I'm sitting on in the picture with the mug of tea is I made that from an old patchwork blanket that I had, and I am a bit of a hoarder of blankets, physically can't use them all. So I decided to recycle that to turn it into a cushion. Now I do have a tutorial for that for anyone. We can share that later on.
Amazing.
So thinking of your cushions, even if you have like, you can recover old outdoor seat pads, and you can get fabric that has a coating on it that you can use outside. But like when it comes to, I think we think, oh, our cushions and stuff and all our bits outside, and like that, it's raining today. And I think us Irish people have a sixth sense of when the rain is coming, even if it's sunny.
An internal meter to bring the washing in.
It's like a weather thing we just have built in, where we're like, oh, better run out and get the washing. So obviously take your outdoor bits in, or if you have a box in the garden that you can put your fabric in,
just somewhere, you know, to store them. And
and then in winter, definitely take them inside, especially something that's DIY like that and cotton, just to stop any mold. So I don't store those cushions in the shed. I make sure they're nice and dry.
That's a really good tip.
Yeah, in the hot press up high, or in a wardrobe or something, just to protect them from any molds.
Perfect. And then in terms of like walls and fences, I know that you're saying that at first you're a little bit cautious of dark colors, but now that you're a great fan.
If you had said to me paint it black, I would have been absolutely not. But I remember I was at a flower show and I was talking to a garden designer, and she was talking me through her garden. And the idea behind the garden was it was to be, you know, for a family sized garden. So your typical rectangle. And her fences. So she said, would you believe I have like a 8-foot shed here? And I was like, where? And she's like, I have a compost section and I have a bike rig. And I was like, where was it? It was painted black.
It was in disguise.
It was disguised. And like that, she had the contrast of trees, the barks of trees. She had her veg patch, she had her flowering patch, she had a seating area, all in this common sized family back garden. And because it was painted in a really dark shade, it took the eye away. So if you ever want to hide something in your garden, painting it in a black or almost black or really dark, even a dark kind of green. And I noticed a lot of the show gardens are doing that, because I think they have to, there's rules that they have to follow. So they needed to have a compost section.
Yeah. And
compost sections can be ugly, but it was painted black, and the contrast of the green around it, it just wasn't a focus.
And this is it. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the time you can be wary with black or with darker shades because people think it'll enclose the area, but darker colors actually recede. So they actually can make areas feel bigger. Like even if you think of, you know, if you're at the theater or something like this, all the stagehands dress in black, you know, that's so you don't see them, you know, so it's a really good tip, even like you were saying for bins or anything like that as well.
the dreaded wheelie bins, and especially if like maybe if you store them in the front of your house, maybe you have to have them in the front, you could be, you know, terraced. Yeah, it's a great way to optical illusion and take your eye just away. And if you want to hide anything, and all
Brilliant.
these plants pop off the color as well. So if you have, you know, a white, it might not contrast as much, especially on a sunny day, but green popping off, your plants do look amazing next to it.
Definitely, definitely. So I'm just kind of a little bit conscious of time to make sure that we get a few questions and answers as well, but just not to forget about lighting. And like you say, solar lighting is brilliant as well, you know, in the
Solar
garden.
lighting has come along so much over the years, and it can be inexpensive as well. And festoon lights are really popular, but you don't have to light up the whole garden. It could be in the evening. You just light up your patio area. Maybe you have like a fire pit or a chimney, chimenea, is that what they call
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
And you have your fire pit and you're adding warmth and color. So it doesn't have to be this huge, you know, airplanes landing in the back
Yeah,
garden
it can be
space.
quite subtle, even among the greenery can be
Yeah.
lovely as well. Brilliant. There's such good tips. And again, they'll all be able to be played back on the recording as well. So just with some of the dark colors we were talking about. So I've just grouped together some colors that are actually really good for backdrops. So Four Arches here is a color that you could use instead of black. So that can be great for surrounding walls, for sheds, for, you know, even planters as well, because like greenery up against that, because it just has a tiny bit of green in it, really enhances it. And the same with burrowing here. So there are some really nice, just those two colors are great for if you're looking for a shade of green for a backdrop, but that's not going to take away from your plants. They're really nice. And then the last one, which is a really nice color for a backdrop, is powdered shell. That can be so nice for like built-in planters, and gives a really nice modern feel. What I would say to people, whether it's your you know, your patio planters that are built in or your masonry on your house, I would really recommend to just test powdered shell, or if you're looking for a neutral for it, because your patio or your driveway or, you know, any stonework you have, you just need to make sure the tones work right together. But in terms of Four Arches and burrowing, they pretty much go with everything. They're gorgeous with red brick.
That powdered shell has a bit of warmth to it, because I think sometimes we just intuitively go and grab brilliant white. And brilliant white on a sunny day, I have brilliant white, and that can be kind of harsh, and especially in winter with Irish lighting. Isn't it true that they say in Irish homes, especially for winter, because they're very low lighting, to use like, don't use brilliant white, because it can be to use like a bit warmer depending
Definitely, exactly, Catherine, because I think as well, like I was saying, especially outdoors, that, you know, everything is 2 shades lighter anyway. So if you put a brilliant white outside,
you need
it can be
sunglasses.
blinding. Exactly. Whereas the powdered shell will just feel like an off-white, but it'll have a bit of warmth to it. And as well, what happens with brilliant white is white needs light to make it feel like white and bright. So if it is a grey day, especially internally, that's just going to feel grey because it doesn't have the light it needs to make it feel bright, you know. But all those colors, they would be like my go-to backdrop colors. I just love them. And, you know, they're never going to really date. And even in the depths of winter, you know, on Christmas Eve, they'll still feel gorgeous, you know. So then we've just pulled through a couple of color schemes here as well, just for different, I suppose for different styles. You know, like you were saying, Catherine, like your house would be quite neutral inside, but you've brought more color outside. So it is a chance to play around with it a bit.
Yeah, and I love that you can have like your earthy colors. And when it comes to planting in your garden, you can obviously have, I don't have color schemes, they're all happy accidents. I somehow managed to have purple and yellows at the moment in the garden, and I'm like, I didn't plan that, it just happened. But you can obviously plan your color schemes with your plants, and you can have there's a lovely plant. I think the common name is like a red top poker. I think it's a canothia, and that would look stunning next to that. Even Camassia as well, it would look lovely.
Okay,
So yeah,
that's
thinking
a great tip.
yeah, you can get, you know, plants and color schemes. I find coming into September, my garden takes that. I have loads of yellows with sunflowers and Rebecca's, couple of reds, that's when those colors, it starts to warm up as they get,
Yeah,
and then obviously with the leaves falling as well. And I just think in winter that's gonna just give you a nice pop of color. You don't have to leave the whole table set out, but even one chair sitting next to, you know, a bit of planting will give it like a little pop.
definitely, exactly, just to cheer it up a bit. And I think what you said there is really important about, you know, you're not a stickler for planning everything to the T of like, you know, this is the color scheme, and you know, I don't want to bring in a daffodil because that's going to
Yeah,
kind of, you
no,
know,
that takes the fun
yeah,
out.
exactly. So I think, you know, kind of look at these as a starting point and kind of a guidance that you can have, you know, you're saying mucky swan and your evermore as like, you know, your masonry colors, your fence color, and then bring in your pops of color in your smaller pieces and furniture. But that's just a really nice one sort of as a starting point. And again, that would be great all year round. Then the next one is just don't forget about your front door. Like, again, with your brickwork, whether you've got, you know, your house is rendered, whether it's brickwork or whether it's masonry that's been painted, just really keep that in mind for any colors that you're going with. Just get a little tester pot or an A5 card. But what I love about this color scheme is how well it works with the brickwork and with
Yeah,
the
and you
greenery.
can tell that it's autumnal from the leaves, and it just looks stunning. And I have, if for anyone who has a PVC door, so I painted my door years ago. It was just your usual white, you know, UPVC, and I have aged vellum on it now, which is like a green, looks nice
Lovely.
all throughout the year. But it's really easy once you follow the same preparation steps that we said at the start, and you use the right primer, you can paint your PVC door. I did it in satin, and I have rinsed my door down. I've cleaned the cobwebs
Yeah,
off it, and it's great. It's really durable. My door is just slightly, I don't have a porch, but it's slightly sheltered. But it would still get the elements and stuff, and I haven't had any issues with
it's
PVC.
lasted. Yeah.
It's still on the go. I'm now tempted for a mustard door after seeing that, but sadly I don't have them lovely bricks. So
Oh no, it's gorgeous. But that is really important to keep in mind. If you've got a, you know, a PVC door, that it can be painted. Same with your windows as well. It just comes down to using the right primer. So you can completely give your house a facelift without using, I know it's still a little bit of, you know, labor and the cost of the paint, but it is less expensive than replacing your door as well. This color scheme here is just a little bit more vibrant. Again, just you could use, say, the Zen Retreat for your decking, and the lovely Metro there for, say, your masonry on your house, which all our paints can be used for as well. The main thing again is just that if it's, you know, just been freshly plastered, say your actual house, it just needs to be primed as well. So that would be primer number 4, and the first coat just needs to be diluted. But again, any of the colors can be used for the exterior. You can just chat through with any of the stockists. They'll be able to advise you on which finish as well. But I love this just because it's really cheerful. I think that if you're feeling a bit bolder, you know, you could bring more color in on the actual shed, and then say the sunny mood in some of your trellis or your plant pots or something
and
like
again,
that.
like, that's going to look so like in winter or early spring, like, and think of it as well, like I just think you can have so much fun with sheds. I almost see sheds as like a display piece, because I'm like, that way, you know, pots of daffodils and tulips in spring,
Yeah,
beautiful, changing up
exactly.
and pots in front of it, sunflowers in autumn, it's just going to look really,
Yeah.
really nice. So that could be kind of a backdrop to brighten up a corner in the garden.
Exactly. And even painting the internal
Yes.
shed as well can be so nice, you know, just that you're not going into a drab shed, just to paint it out, even to whitewash it can be so nice. And then the last color scheme is just a little bit more elegant, a little bit more subtle, with Unveiled, which is a really nice muted pink, and then just a really nice off black as well. They can work lovely together. But again, just keep your patio and that in mind for whatever neutrals you might be going with. So again, I'll just chat through the different finishes really quickly. The main ones for outdoor are your wood coat, your satin eggshell or gloss, and then your weather, which would be for the masonry. But the primer really is super important. Anything that hasn't been painted before needs to be primed.
Yeah, prime. Even if you think, it's only small, prime it.
Exactly. So your 3 Ps then, like you were saying,
Yeah, just
if you could chat through it.
paint, and if in doubt, just prime it. Especially if something has been previously painted, maybe you've bought something secondhand or you've painted it years ago and you don't really know what was, the paint is. Follow that prep of cleaning it, giving it a primer, and then putting your top coat on it. It can be so tempting to just lash on a bit of paint, and in the long run it's going to save you time. You're going to get a better finish and it's going to last you longer, and all you have to do is give it a wipe with a rag or a rinse with the hose and it's clean again. You're not out repainting everything every spring. You're just doing your spring clean and that's it.
Yeah, and even the finish you get is going to be so much nicer, in the long run. I think as well to say is just, get stuck into your first small project, isn't it? Don't be afraid of it.
Start small and give yourself more time than you think. I am the queen of being like, I'll do this in the afternoon, and then I find myself rushing, or so give yourself enough time. It's not a race. You're gonna feel amazing when it's finished and you can enjoy it. So enjoy the process of it. If you're kind of feeling like, I have to prime, lash on a podcast or listen to something and you'll be engrossed in it after 10 minutes, and then you'll be buzzing when you have the final coat on and you're like, actually that looks lovely and I'm glad I rescued that. And you'll be showing everyone, you'll be looking at it.
And then it gets addictive, doesn't it? I think once it starts,
you start just looking for rubbish and things to upcycle and paint.
So Catherine, we have a few questions we might just chat through. The first one here is actually for yourself. So they're just saying how great your DIY skills are. And they're wondering if you can recommend really anywhere to start with, DIY for more advice, like a course or book. I know you yourself have a YouTube channel, do you?
Yes, I have a YouTube channel. I have a book. In the back of the book, I have some painting references, but it kind of covers what we have just said. You can almost get like, what is it they call it? Analysis paralysis, where you're looking for all the information on how to do it, but actually the only way you learn is by doing it. So if it is painting a piece of furniture, follow the steps we've just said with the 3 Ps. If you're unsure when you're picking your paint color, just ask. I find my local DIY shops to be better than the chain ones. No shade to the chain ones. It's just the staff deal with trade painters every day and they have a bit more knowledge compared to, some of the chain DIY shops. So if you're unsure on, what finish or whatever, ask and reach out to, the paint shops, but just begin. And if it's, YouTube is amazing. If you're trying to get into maybe more advanced projects, maybe you want to use, power tools or something more advanced, I would always say just stay within your skill set and just keep layering on. And then as well for classes and stuff, I don't know where this person is located, but I know my local school does some courses in the autumn and in the summer. So I've done sewing classes there. I was doing woodwork in spring. And check your local communities, because I know there is a community in, I think it's in Blanchardstown, it's in Mulhuddard, and on a Friday morning they were doing free DIY classes and you just signed up. So maybe check with your community resource centres
to start kind of local first.
Just begin, start small, take a little chair or a pot and just begin.
Brilliant, thanks so much. So then the next colour we have question here is, what color would you suggest for the front door of a soft grey siding to a house? So for that one, to be honest with you, again, if the side of the house is painted, or whether it is rendered, your front door could be really any color. You could go for a neutral, or you could go for something that's quite an earthy color, or you could go quite vibrant. So again, what I would say is to kind of, you know, have a look when you're driving around at houses that you like the look and feel of, or, you know, look through Pinterest or magazines and things like that, just to get ideas, or what colors you're drawn to yourself. But in general, if it's a gray house, you could go for really any color. Like it could be, you know, green, it could be terracotta, something like this for your front door. In terms of the neutral, I would stay sort of on the gray palette. I wouldn't bring in anything that has kind of, you know, too much brown or anything with it, because it'll kind of jar with the gray a little bit. But in terms of actual colors, you know, again, 4 arches could be lovely for that, because it's a really nice neutral, but it's not black. Or you could bring in a really nice green, which would be like standing tall or something like this. The color that we had previously was French mustard on the front door, and that'd be really nice as well. But if you are going for a neutral on the front door, I would just keep in mind the driveway color, and if your house has any other brickwork or anything like that, just to make sure the neutral works with that. So it does. And then we might just try and fit in one more question. So the last one then is just quickly for this one. Can you recommend what grade sandpaper you would use for a metal garden chair? Catherine, do you want to take that one?
I tend to go for like an 80 grit, 80 to 100, but to be honest, I would have a pack of sandpapers in my kit, and I kind of just grab which one isn't looking the worst. I generally kind of stick around the medium, and around 80 to 100 seems to kind of be in my stash. When I was doing my woodwork class, when we were doing our finishing, he did have medium grit papers, and then we worked our way up to the finer grit ones. But don't worry if you look in your stash and you only have fine grit, just don't
let it hold it back. Yeah.
But I would stick around the medium to that 80, 100. Yeah.
Brilliant. And kind of rule of thumb, I suppose, the more sanding it needs, if there's really big drips or something like that, use a coarser sandpaper and then move down to the finer as you want a finer finish then. Brilliant. Thanks so much. So unfortunately, we're coming to the end now of the webinar. Thanks so much to everyone for joining. Catherine, thank you so much. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Thanks a million. So if you could just let everyone know, I suppose, where they can find you if they want some more information or to look in your YouTube videos or anything, that would be great.
So if you go to my website, which is just on the screen there, I have links or little icons. So if you want to find my YouTube, my Instagram, on YouTube, if you go to my page, I do have playlists. If you scroll down the page, there's a DIY playlist, there's a sewing playlist, there's a garden playlist. If there's anything specific or you still have any questions, on Instagram, I know I did the reel with yourselves where we shared the prep prime paint in under a minute. So if you want, you can go to Instagram and even bookmark and save that reel so you can use it as a reference. But if you still have questions, you can just, I'm going to have a cup of tea now and have my lunch. So you can comment under that and I can get back to kind of any questions. And if I don't know, I can just reach out to the lads and ask and find out.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Catherine. And for getting in touch with Colourtrend, you can go to colourtrend.ie or on any of our socials, which is @Colourtrend Paints. Also, if you want to get in touch for a paint consultation, we do interior and exterior. And again, you can get in touch through colourtrend.ie. But thanks so much again for joining. And Catherine, thanks again for you joining. Bye.